Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Wow, have I got an exciting upload for you. But before we get into that upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, everyone, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Alright guys, today's first little order of business that I want to talk to you guys about is I talked to my very good friend, Mr. Baker. Yes, you know him as Coonbo, but I call him Mr. Baker. We had about a 2-hour conversation, almost 3-hour conversation about everything under the sun last night. And when I say that, I mean we don't just talk about cryptids. We talk about everything. We talk about cars. We talk about work that he did back in the day, his childhood, my childhood. He's just a very nice guy. We've got a very good friendship forming. I love talking to him. I mean, he's just very informative and super nice. I'm going to have him on the show this week sometime. And we are going to discuss a lot of information, a lot of the science and just reason why. We'll get into some encounters, I assume, but, you know, we're going to talk about a lot of the scientific proof and just kind of research. My brain went dead right there. That he has done through over, I mean, we're talking about a man that has done this for 50 plus years. You know, not only just like he was calling in Sasquatch when he was a kid with his dad. I mean, he's had quite the interesting run. And but yeah, and he's also going on a research trip very soon. I don't know if I'm able to talk about it, so I'm not going to give too much info on that. We'll talk about it when we have him on the show. But yeah, so I mean, we even talked about the LBL video that everyone seems to be talking about, how the witness hid under the RV and this and that. Well, his view and my view is it's just a crock of shit. Lack of a better word. If he was hiding under an RV, Dogman, Sasquatch, whatever, would have smelled him out and grabbed him. And I guess I haven't listened to the whole thing, but because I couldn't. But I guess he shot the creature with a 410. Now, Coonbo grew up in the South, and he's seen bird dog that had gotten shot by 410 with 6-shot, buckshot, or whatever, bird shot. And they're just fine. You're not killing a dog man with a 410, bottom friggin' line. So, yeah. But we talked about that. But this is what the show is going to be that you guys are going to have very soon with me and Coonbo. And I'm excited about it. So, let's move on to the encounters right now, though. And, yeah. Today's first encounter of the evening. Growing up, I had a childhood friend who lived relatively close by. We were 2 peas in a pod. We were both very adventurous, believed in the paranormal, enjoyed astronomy, and generally just being outside. She was born in Alaska, and her dad had lived there for quite a while, so they were always into camping, hiking, fishing, skiing, you just name it. It was with my friend's family that I was introduced into fishing, and we did a lot of camping. This encounter happened during the mid to late 90s. We were maybe 10, 12 years old. It's been a while, so I can't remember exactly. One camping trip, we went to this lake in the forest that was surrounded by a meadow, and feeding the lake was a small stream leading out of the woods. Anyway, we played in the meadow and stream all day while my friend's dad watched us and fished. The lake wasn't very big, and because it had a meadow all around it, he could keep an eye on our whereabouts while he was fishing. While messing around by the stream, the wooded area it was coming from gave me weird vibes. I really can't explain it. I just felt very uneasy. Anyway, the day faded away into early evening, and it was time to leave and find a camping spot. My friend's dad packed up his fishing gear, and we all walked back to the truck on this long, winding path through the woods. Once we were in the truck, we drove into a more remote area of the forest and made our way up this steep road that was so rough and at such an incline that I was convinced that my friend's dad was going to break his truck. He had maybe a 6-cylinder Toyota pickup. That was about as basic as a truck could get. In fact, I'm not even sure if the truck had 4-wheel drive. But being an Alaskan outdoorsman with years of experience, I trusted him. We finally made it up to the top, which was flat and relatively open, with a big area of forest in the opposite direction from the road we drove up. We pitched our tents, got everything set up, and my friend and I decided to go explore a while. We were there maybe 50 yards from the tent when we heard a big crack as a tree branch snapped in the woods behind us. We got quiet and looked in that direction, but didn't see anything. Thinking it was probably just a deer, we brushed it off. As we were walking, we heard it again, and whispered to one another about what it could be, but we kept going. It stopped briefly, and when we were about 200 yards from our camp, we sat on a boulder, looking down the steep wooded hill, overlooking the dirt road from where we had just came. Suddenly we heard another cracking branch from behind. Whatever it was seemed to be following us. Our imaginations were going wild. We came up with everything from a serial killer stalking us in the woods to a deer to a Bigfoot or a Dogman. When we got back to the campsite, we told her dad what we had heard and how it seemed to be paralleling us. He kind of played it off as a black bear and secured all the food. Later on, my friend confided in me that her dad had gotten out his pistol and would be sleeping with it that night. My friend and I were sharing one tent, and he was in his own, not too far from us. So we figured everything would be okay. I awoke sometime in the middle of the night to hearing something or someone walking around outside. As I lie still listening, I could hear it quietly circling the tent. It sounded like it was walking on 2 legs because it had a distinct rhythm in how it walked. Whatever it was, it sounded big, as I could hear its weight, if that makes sense, as it put each foot down and walked. I could even hear relatively quiet but deep, heavy breathing at times. As I lie there listening, I could hear it wandering to other parts of the campsite and then back to our tent, almost as if it was walking in a big, repetitive loop. This went on for, God, who knows how long. It felt like an eternity. Terrified and unable to wake up my friend, I lie there listening until I eventually fell asleep. The next morning I told my friend and her dad about it, but I don't know if they believed me or not. Interestingly, absolutely nothing in the camp was disturbed in any way. The ground was not very soft, and in some places was covered with grass, so there were no footprints as well. This is something that I have never been able to explain, and to this day lingers in the back of my mind when camping. I always wonder what it was that walked around our tent all night. Today's second encounter of the evening. So about 3 years ago, I was visiting a family member who lived in Celebration, Florida. During the day, I took a walk around the town, and there was a very nice path, definitely not too deep of wilderness. It wrapped through the swamp. I think technically it was the Everglades, or at least it said it led to it. Super nice houses lined the opposite side, maybe 100 yards away, just separated by a pond. So fast forward to later that night, I head to get dinner by myself and end up throwing back a few drinks. So I decide, why not take a walk down this path? So I started walking. It was perfect weather, just overall a beautiful night. I continue down the path and get to what I would say the most isolated part, but I can still see the houses. I begin to hear something walking through the tree line 25 feet away from me, and just kind of got a weird feeling. But it's the swamp at night, so whatever. I continue walking and I hear the movement, almost as if it was mirroring me walking down the path. I got that weird feeling something wasn't quite right, so I call my buddy from back home, just so I wasn't really alone. I'm telling him what's going on, and I decide that I'd just keep going straight, which came out to the opposite side of town, and just take the long way back. So I finally get across the little bridge to a cluster of houses, and no more noise. But now I have no clue on how to get back to the house I was staying at. My phone is beginning to get a very low battery, and the cherry on top was 2 days before Halloween, so all the creepy decorations were up. I managed to throw on my GPS, and sure enough, it wants me to get back onto the path, albeit way further down, so I figured it'd be fine. I'm actually getting chills just thinking about this. I cross the bridge and begin down the path and immediately hear something pacing in the woods. At this point, I am fully freaked out and just full sprint down the way I know I need to get back. And whatever it was now also in full sprinting right through the woods alongside of me. I am by no means slow, and whatever it was felt like it was going to stride for stride with me. To get where I needed to go, I had to cross another bridge that was much longer and was through full foliage. I get to the other side and no longer hear anything next to me. And it would have been impossible for it to follow me as the bridge was over a gully with some water. Just as I think everything is good, friggin' Bambi is on the other side and nearly gives me a heart attack. It was not what was making the noise previous, but man, I had never been so happy to see a deer in my life. My buddy, who was on the phone, could hear everything and didn't know what to say. I spent a good amount of time in actual wilderness, and nothing ever compared to that experience. Needless to say, I never went back on that path. So, right there, just a quick one on this. This poor guy, I really think whatever was in the woods, whether it be Dogman or Sasquatch, skunk ape, whatever, which we all know skunk ape is just the Florida or southern variety of a Sasquatch, or name, not variety, excuse me. I think whatever it was that this poor guy stumbled upon was actually after that small deer, and maybe just figured, hey, well, this guy's out in the woods and now that's my dinner. So, wow, but that's definitely terrifying. Moving on. Today's third part of the upload. I've always wanted to try the car life thing after watching so many YouTubers live in their car and just travel around the country. I lived in Fort Lauderdale for 5 years and thought I was going to be stuck there, and that was it. Then the pandemic hit, and I checked my bank account and I was back paid thousands of dollars. Before I know it, I'm packing up all of my stuff, and my landlord said I could leave my furniture and it'd be fine. Now I'm heading on 95, heading north, laughing and actually leaving, and I couldn't believe it. I managed to get the hang of the whole car life thing and become more comfortable stealth parking in different places and not being detected. I had not done any off-grid stuff yet, but was more comfortable with by the time I reached Lake Tahoe. I was hiking and asked some guy with his dog, local, if he knew where I could sleep in my car because Tahoe seemed tricky. He said there was a place up in the mountain called Hope Valley. It sounded good, so off I went. Now, Lake Tahoe is already very high in altitude, so this was a few thousand feet higher than that. It was past July. As I reached the area, I saw a small parking lot That was the entrance to the Wildlife Nature Preserve. It was closed and empty, so that would do. I'm all settled in with my blanket, and the sun is setting and the temperature plummets. Before I know it, it's pitch black and visibility is 0. I start to hear howling, and at this point, I'm game. This was the experience I wanted. It was a little creepy, but I was fine. I was living what would normally be watching on YouTube in my apartment. Before the sun went down, I noticed there were garbage cans that were overfilled 15 feet from the car at the entrance to the preserve. I finally drifted off to sleep and was awakened by something at 3 in the morning. You couldn't see anything anywhere, it was so dark. And then I heard heavy footsteps right outside my door. At this point, I'm shitting bricks because I'm a New York City guy. Then something brushes against my car, and it's heavy. I'm scared and don't know what to do. I wait a couple of minutes. I then open the door, run around the car as fast as I can to the driver's side, drove down the mountain, and slept in Motel 7 parking lot like a baby. Never made it through my first and only off-the-grid car camping adventure and won't forget it. The only other time that trip that something creepy happened was in Mount Shasta. I drove halfway up the mountain, parked on the side of the road, and got out and started walking into this trail. I made it about 70 yards and heard a low growl. I never ran so fast back to my car in my life. The rest of the trip was the best hiking I had ever done in Montana. Today's fourth part of the upload. This happened while living in the foothills of the Pacific Northwest. Before I get into my experience, I'd like to give you a little background about my dog growing up. His name was Fonzie, because he had long black hair with a white patch on his chest. Growing up, he was my best friend and protector. He was a mix of Chow and German Shepherd. And if you ever met a Chow, I'm sure you're aware that once they imprint on you, they won't accept anyone but you, and they are fearless protectors, which was just multiplied with the mix of German Shepherd. On to the encounter. When I was 8, we lived in the foothills of Mount Baker, in a not-so-populated area. One evening, around dusk, outside my house, Fonzie and I were up to our usual shenanigans. He would sit behind me as I shot my BB gun at some targets I had set up on the tree line, when all of a sudden he moved in front of me and started growling, which only happened when he felt I was in danger, right after he got between me and the tree line, about 20 feet. A very deep and loud, almost clicking sound came from the trees. Limbs were breaking, and you could hear the ground pounding. We were both terrified. He started whimpering, which he never did, and we ran into the house. I looked out the window to see if whatever it was came out of the woods, but nothing emerged. I told my dad about it, but he didn't believe me and jokingly said it was probably a Bigfoot, but I had never heard anything about a Bigfoot. Black bears tend to stay away from loud dogs, and it was way too loud to be a cougar. So that's my experience. I've never told anyone but my parents and my wife. By far the most terrifying experience of my life, and still haunts me to this day. I'm 31 years old now. Today's fifth experience of the night. I'm absolutely positive this was a Dogman encounter I had. I live in a part of Alaska where there's nothing but woods all around. I'm the only person who lives in these woods for about 20.5 miles all around. So visitors are always a special event. This time, though, it was a creepy event. I decided to go camping in the woods about 5 miles away from my cabin because I was stressed out that week and needed to get away from it all. I found a nice clearing and set up camp before nightfall. These woods aren't very quiet. There are always birds chirping, rustling of leaves, and bunnies and deer running about. It was about 7 at night when the first incident happened. I was listening to the wilderness outside of my tent while the fire was dying outside. I had my pack strung up in a tree and had my 12 gauge unloaded to my right, All of a sudden, all the noise in the area stopped. But then I heard what sounded like snow crunching. I thought it was just a deer. The only real predators in the area that I know about are bears, but this was far too heavy to be a deer or a bear. It was circling my camp. All I could hear was the snow crunching underneath what sounded like a two-legged animal, slowly getting closer. It did this for hours. I had my 12 gauge ready, but only remembered it wasn't loaded until the animal was about 7 feet away from my tent. I grabbed the box of buckshot and put in the first shell. Click, the footsteps stopped. Click, click, click. I kept straining to hear anything, but it never came. I fell asleep for a few hours, but woke up at around 2 in the morning. My tent was open. I saw my shotgun right outside of my tent. I felt like I was being watched. All I could see were the stars in the pitch-black nothingness. But 2 stars moved. I didn't know how to react. The 2 stars that moved were now coming closer. They were eyes. The animal had to have been 9 feet tall, and it kept coming closer. I could now smell it. It smelled like rotten meat and death. My shotgun was only a foot away from my hand. I carefully grabbed it. I prayed that it was still loaded, and that this thing had not unloaded it. I pumped the shell into the chamber and took a shot. The light was almost blinding in the dark wilderness, but what I saw made it worse. It was hairy, way too hairy to be a human, and too big to be a bear. It was gigantic and darkish in color. The face, I really can't explain the face, but it was the same color as the hair. The eyes were huge, and they were staring directly at me with a reddish glow. The mouth was wide open, and the teeth were long and sharp and yellow. The arms were long and hairy, just like its legs. Its height had to be 9 feet tall, maybe a few inches less. After the shot, I heard a scream that shook the tent and the ground around it. I had hit this beast. I heard it run off into the wilderness, screaming all the way. I started packing up right away, in the pitch-black night, looking up at the stars. None moved this time, though. As I was leaving the clearing in which I made my camp, I looked back and saw those same huge eyes shining in the darkness, and they were moving toward me. I ran through the woods. Unsure of where I was going and what time it was, I could hear leaves snapping behind me, and when I looked back, the eyes were there. But they were getting closer this time. I saw the lights of my house in the distance through the thick woods. I could still hear the snapping, but it was further back this time, though. I made it home and locked my door. The paranoia almost made me pass out. I still felt like I was being watched, even though I closed all the curtains to the windows. The only window without curtains or blinds was a small window that was above the kitchen sink. I was in the living room for about an hour. It was now 5:30 in the morning, and the sun would be rising soon, so I looked around the house, still paranoid. I saw the window above the sink in the kitchen, but there was nothing there. I felt relieved for a few seconds, until the eyes moved into place, looking right at me. We made eye contact, and I saw the first rays of sunlight coming through the window. The animal grunted and stomped back into the forest, shaking the ground and cabin as it moved. I didn't see it often anymore, but it does show up sometimes when I'm leaving the living room, watching a movie, or making food in the kitchen. I see those eyes. It only comes at night, but it's still there. I feel that we've come to an agreement. I stay away from the woods at night, and I don't get eaten. I'll keep everyone updated if anything more happens. It's been months since the first incident, and nothing drastic has happened yet. Alright guys, there's today's upload. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Man, there is nothing better than just talking to somebody like Coonbo. Just learning about his knowledge of what he has done and what he has learned to kind of draw them in so he can see them. We had some amazing conversations, like I said earlier. he was telling me conversations about one of his buddies that lives in Africa. We talked about when he was working in Central America, and he actually had a brush or a run-in with some cannibalistic tribe in the mid-Central America region. And to be honest, the guy is just a library of information, of experiences that he has had. And I really feel privileged just being able to talk with him. And just a really nice guy. And I can't wait to have him on, so you guys can kind of feel what I feel every time I talk to him, because you feel a little bit, not smarter, but you just feel like a little bit more like you have a grasp on it. Or I don't know if I'm even making sense, but I mean, there is no experts in this field, but if there ever were be one, Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker would be my first vote for being an expert. But, a lot of people will debate that and stuff like that because it's this crypto world, And I think the only reason why everybody is feuding is because everybody wants to be the first to find something, the first to do that, where I don't give a crap about that. I just want to know. Just like you guys. I mean, I really just want to know what is going on, why it had to go down like this, why they kept it a secret from us, what they are. I could care less if, there's a plaque with my name on it saying, hey, this is Jeffrey Nadolny, the first guy to drag a Dogman in, or the first guy to drag a Sasquatch in. I don't care about that. And I know a lot of people say they don't, but they really do, and you can tell who those people are. Multiple YouTubers, because they're the ones that are backstabbing everybody, and they love to do it. I could name 10 right now, and just it makes no sense, because if those 10 people work together and swallowed their non-existent pride, being the pride that they, they really haven't done anything. They've gone into the woods a couple of times with a burger and some Coke and French fries, or, it's just ridiculous. I don't know. I think really what needs to happen is everyone needs to get along, sit down, figure it out, work with all parts of the crypto world, like narrators like myself. But I really, honestly, I don't consider myself just a narrator, because I do a lot of research. I did a lot of research when I was able to go outside and walk around and just into the woods and stuff like that. But, right now I'm doing research into these unexplained deaths and missing people. I'm just not narrating encounters like some people, or interviewing people. And those are not experts. I am not an expert. I'm just a guy who loves what I'm doing and will continue to do it, even when nobody wants me to do it anymore. I'll just be the scourge. Just kidding. I'm going to be the asshole that keeps recording and narrating when people are like, we hate Jeff Nadolny. We hate Bigfoot and Dogman. We love green booger monsters, or who fucking knows? I don't even know. I don't know. But we just need to all work together and just push on to get the answers. With that, I'm going to see y'all later. See ya!